Chuck, if you could switch the slide to the next slide for me real quick. I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar Wednesday. Today, Chuck is going to be talking about the Roaring 20s. We are recording today's session, so if you need to come back and visit it again, a link will be sent out tomorrow morning with the information for the recording. And for those of you who weren't able to watch the live session, you can send in your questions to Chuck at his email at cshinn@shinnconsulting.com if you have questions. I want to remind you that if you do have questions and somebody's actually already asked a question, you can ask questions down at the bottom in the speech bubble. There is a Q&A bubble for you down there that you can ask questions about the webinar. If you have questions or you need any assistance from me, you can reach me or any of our panelists on the chat function down below. So with that, Chuck, will you go ahead and switch the slide for me? We want to thank our sponsor, ECI. They're a great partner for us here at Builder Partnerships. We do have an API with them, so if you are using them for your services, you can connect with us to help you with your rebate process. It makes it so much simpler. Go ahead and switch to the slide. I want to read a little bit more about ECI Marks. ECI Software Solutions offers residential home builders and developers an integrated suite of cloud-based management solutions to improve profitability, reduce construction costs, shorten schedules, and increase sales. Mark Systems is the industry's leading single platform, completely integrated, easy to use cloud-based management solution that maximizes business efficiencies. Build Tools is a web-based construction project management solution designed for custom home builders and remodelers to easily manage tasks and activities. LotView, lot inventory management solution engages home build buyers and streamlines collaboration. Our integrative sitemaps engage home buyers on your website and drives more inquiries. Lasso is the leading CRM for home builders, real estate developers, and new home agencies built to radically improve lead management, convert more prospects to buyers, and sell communities faster and easier and more profitably. And finally, Bolt web-based subcontractor software provides trades in the home building industry with powerful scheduling, project management, and estimating features to simplify and streamline their business. So we want to thank ECI for making today's webinar possible. Chuck, if you want to go ahead and...
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing about ECI. I mean, they've been a great supporter for us over the years. They support our seminars, they support our hospitality rooms, they support the summit. They've been an absolute great supporter of us over the years.
And are you able to hear me okay? I have a comment that the audio is not working too great. Are you able to hear me over there, Chuck? Okay.
I can hear you fine.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and continue. If anybody else has any issues, go ahead and send me a message through the chat bubble, and I will make sure that you guys can hear the audio okay. We have a few questions from Nicholas before we get started. Chuck, do you want me to read them, or do you want to hold all questions till the end of the webinar?
Let's hold the questions for a little bit, and let me get through most of this because they're good questions, and they fit in with the report and the presentation. So let's kind of hold. We'll go through the questions at the end.
Okay, excellent. So if you want to switch the slide, I think we're ready for you to get started. And most of you already know Chuck, I'm sure. He is an industry leader and been working in the home building industry for over 50 years. He has spent his life dedicated to helping home builders across the country make substantial profits in their organization. And his goal is to make sure that all of you are making the profits that you deserve as a home builder. So if you would like to go ahead.
And we just had one of our builders send us year-end financial statements, and they went from 3 years ago when we first met, they were making 0.4%. Their final statement that they just sent us to Emma was they were making 9%. Fantastic return of events in 2 years. So congratulations for those of you that have been able to do that. Today's presentation, we kind of got a whole bunch of pieces that I'm going to go through. How do we get here? and that is going to go back a decade, basically back to 2005, 2006, and then 2009, and come back to where we are. And as we go into this current decade that we're in right now, where are we going? The impact of the pandemic shut down both the positive and the negatives. We did a survey at the end of the year, and I've got a couple of slides from that on what the builders are experiencing right now. The impact of the election, which is new, that I have not changed my forecast based on the election and the impact, but I've gone through and talk about quite a bit of the impacts that we're going to have, and then I've got a forecast for 2021 on housing. So we'll go through that, and then at the end I've got charts so that you can take a look at some of the charts and where we stand, and how the industry has been performing over the last basic decade that we look at. I start out with this slide, and this is a pretty important slide. These are the economic cycles that we've had during my lifetime, and being in this business. But the big thing is the last one, though. Excuse me. Let me get back to where I was. You begin to look at the cycles and when they occurred and how long they've occurred, as we go through the cycles. The worst cycle we've ever had was the last one that we went through from November 05 to January 09. We went from 1.8 million single family starts to 357,000 single family starts in 39 months. That was an 80% drop, over an 80% drop. There's kind of a reason for that. We were supposed to go into a recession in 2019, 2000, or 2000, excuse me, 2000. We were supposed to go into a recession right at the turn of the decade. So right at 2000, we were supposed to go into a recession. The tech bubble burst, and what happened was the Fed reduced interest rates and supported us, and we kept chugging along through that recession, and we ended up hitting a gigantic recession in 2005. So it was a pretty substantial recession. But this is kind of the cycles that we go through as we go through. Right now, we're on borrowed time. Right now, we're in the 12th year of the recovery as we go forward. Now, when I look at the 2020s, there's a number of things that I look at. And I said, I'm forecasting us to outperform the 70s. The 70s was when the baby boomers came in. We had finally, in the latter part of the 1950s and the first part of the 1960s, we had satisfied the pent-up demand from the recession of World War II, and that was the end. But at the beginning of the 1970s, latter part of the 1960s, first part of the 1970s, and basically the decade of the 70s was when the baby boomers came into the housing market. And I make that comment. The other thing is we had the Omnibus Housing Act, where we set up housing goals, and we had a housing goal, and there's a story about how this got set up. But in 10 years, we were going to satisfy all the housing needs in the United States, and we were going to build 25 million homes, or an average of 2.5 million homes. We never made the goal. We counted everything, including dog houses, trying to get to the 2.5 million. However, for 5 years during that decade, we built over 2 million houses annually. And that's the best basically we've ever done. What I look at for the 2020s is we've got two of the largest demographic groups on the move, and they're needing housing. The baby boomers are in the last stage of housing demand. They basically, during this decade, will be all retired, and they're going to be downsizing. and they've already started. They postponed their downsizing during the last decade, but they are right now on the move, and they're going to be moving out of their larger homes into smaller, maintenance-free type of living, and that's occurring, and it will occur throughout the decade as we go forward. The millennials are finally, the front end of the millennials is 39 years old. They're finally growing up, and they're getting into ownership. The latter part of the last decade, they were into multifamily rental, and beginning of this decade, they have been moving to for sale housing, and big demand for existing homes, big demand for new construction. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So when I look at the Great Recession, I mentioned the fact that we went down to over 80%. Foreclosed filings increased 225% from 2006 to 2008. We had 6.3 million homes foreclosed on during from January 2006 to April of 2016. Now, everybody wonders where they all went. All those foreclosed, the investors bought them. It was basically a large percentage of them went to investors, and they went into the pool of for rent single family homes. Didn't necessarily come back onto the market. Home prices during that period of time tumbled over 30%, from the peak to where they were at the end of the recession. We lost 50.8%, almost 51% of all the residential builders disappeared from 2006 to 2012. We went in 2006. Historically, we've had about 100,000 builders. That's basically what our industry has been ever since I've been collecting information on this industry back in the 60s. But the census was over 98,000 builders in 2006. By 2012, that dropped to 48,000. So that was a 50.5% drop in builders. We also had a drop in the trade base. We lost about over 50% of our trades from 2006 to 2011. That's the reason why we have a trade shortages right now. Even though we're not building that many houses that we built during the boom, we have trade shortages because basically we have not gotten the trades back. A lot of those trades were 55 years old, got unemployed. They spent almost 4 years without work, and they ended up being hired at something else. You find a lot of old trades in Home Depot. You find them in Lowe's. You find them all over the place. And they got steady pay, and they got some retirement funds, and they're not necessarily coming back. So we need younger people coming back. I think right now is a good time for doing that because we've got a huge unemployment of restaurant, leisure employees. We could retool them and get them back into our industry very easily if the builders would actually start working and trying to create training programs for the trades with their trades. The recovery was very long. Through the teens, we were basically recovering. It was long, weak economic and housing recovery. It's been the longest recovery. Like I said, it's been 12 years, but the GDP only grew 2.28%, which is tepid. I mean, it just, we never had a real good, strong return during the decade of recovery. We did have a first-time homebuyer subsidy program from 2009 to 2012. That gave us a little bubble, but it was over in 2012, and the market just dropped right back to being a very soft market for housing. We also saw raising mortgage interest rates from 2012. The second half of the decade, the Fed increased rates 10 times, and mortgage rates reached almost 5% at 4.87% in November of 2019. That also kept us weak. I look at 5% as probably the threshold of where it's going to cut off housing demand if we get back up into that 5% range for interest rates. Now, I can remember when interest rates were 16%. So I think 5% is absolutely fantastic, but I'm an old geezer, and the new norm is much lower than that. The housing industry also reduced capacity. What we saw is we lost half our builders, we lost half of our trade contractors, and in October of last year, we had over 300,000 open positions, and probably it's worse now in the open positions for residential trade contractors. There's a shortage in building materials also. Before the recession, most of our suppliers were building new plant and equipment, and they got caught, mainly because everybody was saying it was only going to be a 10% mild recession, and it ended up being an 80% recession. So many of those plants never opened. And as we came back with the weak recovery, our suppliers and our manufacturers have been very hesitant on expanding their manufacturing capacity. They've also have a lack of expansion in distribution channels for the industry. The other thing that happened is we lost our land developers. The people that were specialized in land development, most of the builders today, they need to develop their own land because we don't have the volume of land developers in the marketplace that we used to have. So that's creating a problem for our finished lot inventory in the industry. When we started the decade in 2020, when you start looking at, okay, how did we start the decade? We started the decade with a shortage. Freddie Mac estimated that the shortage was about a 3.3 million homes at the beginning of the decade. That means that's about 300,000 units added units that need to be developed every year. Realtor.com estimated the shortage to be 3.8 million. And if I look at it historically, we're about 4 million single-family homes below the historical average starts for the last 50 to 60 years. We're 37% lower than the average production. And again, when I look at that on an annual basis, that means I need to just catch up. I need an additional 400,000 single-family homes per year through the decade to be able to catch up with the shortage that we have in the industry. So here's the facts, and we look at it. 1960s, we built 9.3 million single-family homes. 1970s, 11.4 million single-family homes. 1980, 9.9 million single-family homes. 1990s, 11.3, and the 2000s, 12.3. Average is about 10.8 million single-family homes per decade. During the teens, 2010s, we only built 6.8 million single-family homes. That was 37% fewer than the average that we had built for the last 50 years. Well, if I just look at the difference between 2000 and 2010, that's a 44.7% reduction in production. Now you start understanding why the manufacturers aren't excited about expanding capacity, because they're looking at the fact in the housing market did not perform during the 2010s. And so, they might be interested in sales to fill their factories, but they weren't necessarily interested in expanding their capacity, which now we need in the operation. The other thing was the tradespeople. The tradespeople aren't going to necessarily expand if they don't have the volume of sales and production that they're looking at. If I look at the single family starts per million population, again, this is another way to take a look at this, is there's the production per year. You can see the 1970s where we built 53,000 single family starts per million population. Well, I suspect that the 2020s is going to exceed that because I've got the two populations. That was basically just the baby boomers coming into the market. Now we've got the baby boomers and the millennials both on the move during this decade. But if I look at my historical average, the historical average was 45,000 single family starts per million population. During 2010s, we only built 21,288 single family starts per million population. That was a shortfall of 52.7%. That, if I go back and look at just the 2000 to 2010, that was a 49, almost a 50% drop in single family activity per million population. Again, both of these are showing us that we start this decade, which is going to be a dynamite decade with two populations on the move, and we start the decade with a deficit. So again, we just take a look at this. All right, now, the Fed, and I'll get to this in just a second, but the Fed started reducing interest rates in November of 2019, and the last little bit of 2019 was a very strong market. We started 2020 extremely strong until March 12th. On March 12th, the bottom dropped out. The World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. We went to shelter in place in mid-March through April. That's our peak buying season, and we're closed down. We did a seminar, and then I had a builder group, and we spent the whole builder group talking about how do we social distance? How do we stay in business and social distance? What do we do with our sales office? What do we do with our design center? What do we do with our office? What do we do with everything? Okay, and that was, we came up, we spent 2 days working on that. And then by Monday, this was the 12th, 13th, 14th, by Monday, we were sheltered in place, closed, totally changed the operation. So no face-to-face anything, basically, at that point. During that period of time, we lost 20.6 million jobs from mid-March through April. Unemployment increased from 3.5% to 14.7%. The industries that were hit was basically leisure and hospitality, which kind of was okay for us because those were your renters. Those are the lower income type of industries that really got slammed in this unemployment, and it was concentrated on that in those areas. Mainly because the Fed came in and the federal government made a lot of support. The Fed reduced the Fed funds rate to target to 0 to 0.25%. That caused mortgage rates to plummet. The CARES Act, which was a stimulus, the PPP loans allowed us to keep our employees and get government subsidized loans or guaranteed loans, which generally have been forgiven. We had cash payments go to families. If you had a family of 4, you got a $3,500 payment right into your checking account. And if you were unemployed, you got a $600 per week increase on your unemployment benefits from the Fed. This kept people working, kept people in their positions. So it reduced the amount of unemployment that we probably would have had with the pandemic, and that was good for us in the housing industry. The shelter and some of the benefits that we got back. The shelter in place. Well, it was 6 weeks, and the shelter in place, people had to stay in their homes, and they got cabin fever. All of a sudden, I've got the kids and the family, and everybody is basically sheltered in place in their homes. They're trying to work from their homes. They're trying to live through their homes, and we got a big case of cabin fever. It also forced savings. At the end of the shutdown, there was about $460 billion worth of excess savings in the consumer's hands. They couldn't spend any of the money. They got the $3,500. They got the $600 subsidy on their unemployment, but there was no place to spend any of the money. So what happened was the savings rate went from below 8% to 33%. Well, how did that impact us? All of a sudden, families now had earnest money, deposit money, so that they could go buy a home. So they had cash in their pocket. They had no place to spend it. The other thing that happened is we needed to work remotely. All of industry, basically, it's still that way. I was just in an office that held 300 people pre-COVID. When I was in that office, it was two of us and the people we were meeting with, and there were two of them. So that whole office building had an occupancy of 4 people. When you start talking to your vendors, the vendors are all working from home. They can't travel. So what happened is basically everybody is working remotely. That disrupted the relationship between home and work. All of a sudden, I don't have to commute. Okay, so what that allows me to do now is to start thinking about moving to the urban fringe. Since I've been disconnected on the commute ride, I can go to the urban fringe, or I can go to exurbitant. In other words, go to smaller communities that are isolated outside of the major metropolitan area, and I can still maintain my work relationship because I am working remotely. The other thing that happened is historical low mortgage rates increased. The 30-year fixed rate mortgage in December was 2.68%. That's free money. The average for 2020 was 3.11. And if I go back to November of 2019, the interest rate was 4.87%, or almost 5%. So this drop in interest rates has really stimulated demand, huge demand. We came out with a super V when we came out of the COVID. In fact, we did not. The builders were still selling houses during the shutdown. During that 6-week shutdown period of time, builders were still selling houses. So I look at it and I say, okay, COVID-19, who are the winners and who are the losers with the lockdown and the urban riots and the COVID? Well, the winners, suburban and exurban, satellite cities. I have a little retail center in a satellite city. So I've got a local bar, I've got a grocery store, I've got maybe it's a convenience store, not necessarily a grocery store, but I've got a drugstore. And all of a sudden I'm saying I've got what I need in a human scale, little small city. And so all of a sudden I'm starting to see the satellite cities come alive. Small urban areas as opposed to the large urban areas. Southern affordable locations. Exodus of the Northeast and California. Massive move. Online retail shopping was a winner. Home telecommuting was a winner. Single family housing, a winner. Home ownership, a winner. Homeschooling, a winner. Parents had to figure out how to get the kids educated. and charter and private schools also, because of the public schools being closed down across the country. We're seeing a big movement towards charter and private schools. The losers, metropolitan center cities, urban core cities, large urban areas, northern high tax locations, brick and mortar retail and malls. I mean, the malls are just ghost towns. Yeah, strip commercial is vacant. Office buildings completely vacant. Multifamily housing, especially in the urban core, has been hit. Rental housing, public schools, and teachers. The teachers union is a big loser. When I say rental housing, it's multifamily rental housing. We are seeing a big movement on rental single family housing as a new area of demand. So what, if I look at the existing home sales, existing home sales in 2020 increased 5.5%. It was very strong. It would have been stronger if they had inventory. They basically have no inventory. The demand reached 6.9 million by the end of last year. That is a huge demand at 6.9 million. We normally look at, I need to have about 5 million plus for a good market. And we were hitting 6.9 million. Houses were being sold in less than 21 days that were on the market. 7 to 80% of the houses were sold within 30 days, within a month. And there's very little for sale inventory. Right now, we got 492,000 homes that are on inventory across the country, and it's less than 2 months of supply. Right now, the supply is about 1.9 months of supply that we have in inventory. So basically, there is no inventory of existing homes, which means that you got to go new. Okay, but now let's look at new. New home sales increased 20% during 2020. Very strong. It's reached an annual rate of about 950,000 sales during the last half of the year. And there's very little new for sale inventory. There's 286,000 homes in inventory across the country. That's less than 4 months of supply. So if I'm going to buy with no inventory of existing and no inventory of new, I got to buy to be built. And that turns into what has happened. And many of the builders right now have a very huge backlog. I've talked to several builders. They got 60 to 70% of my anticipated sales for 2021. I've already got on the books. That's great, except your costs are increasing. So I'm going to have a little bit of a problem in having a huge backlog, but I've got a lot of cost increases because I've got shortages of materials. I've got shortages of labor. So that gives me a squeeze that I need to pay attention to. Okay. Some of the issues that we deal with when, let me get back there, with the builders. Home builders are operating right now at 150, 175% capacity. When I talk to my builders, they are just balls to the wall and how many houses they're trying to build at this point. And they've overloaded their superintendents, they've overloaded their trades, they've jump-started as many houses as they possibly can. And I say, okay, well, what are you on your percentage of capacity? And I'm getting back 150, 175% of my capacity. I can't do that for very long. But that's where the builders have been over the last six to 8 months. Inadequate trade base, we got shortage of our key trades in the operation. We got material capacity problems. And the results back that I'm getting back from my builders on the shortages. I've got shortages of windows. In fact, we were just talking to a window manufacturer, and they are um, they just cannot keep up with the demand, and they're a couple of months behind. Kitchen cabinets, door slabs, hardware for the doors. You don't even think about that, but all of a sudden I can't get hardware for the doors. Lumber, the prices is going nuts. And one of the problems with, I've talked to the lumber industry. One of the problems is the lumber industry got scared to death with the COVID and the close down. They got rid of all their inventory. They just bulk sold it, got rid of it, and then when we spiked back with this very strong V, they don't. First off, a lot of the mills got closed down, and a lot of the lumber industry got closed down. So right now, one of the lumber yards I was talking to. He says, "I don't care what the price is. I just want the material." And right now, they're taking bids on the material as the rail cars are being loaded. I've experienced this in the past. I experienced it when they were taking bids on the rail cars as they went to Chicago, and the winner of the load was the last bidder when they broke the bulk in Chicago, and then the rail car was diverted to wherever they sold it. Appliances, again, we've talked to appliance people, and they're a couple of months behind. You can't even find appliances in Home Depot or Lowe's. Roofing, insulation, interior trim, flooring tile, plumbing fixtures, and light fixtures. All of those are in short supply at this point as we move into the 2020. So these are issues that we have to deal with that are going to give us a problem. But that doesn't impact the demand. The demand for housing is huge right now. Okay? Some of the other issues that the builders have talked about: cost containment. How do I contain my costs? My construction schedules have been extended. I'll show you some of the results that we got back from some of the surveys. Finished lot inventory. I'm running out of finished lot inventory. And then the government regulations, especially with the close down because of COVID, the people aren't in their offices, the government offices. It's hard to get permits. It's hard to get inspections and so forth. So that is a big issue at this point. This is a survey. Okay, sales traffic for the fourth quarter of 2020. 49% of the people that responded to the survey said that it's above average. About 36% said it was average, and 15% said below average in the fourth quarter. Okay, if I go and look at what there's the beginning of the year, how did 2020 change? It increased 0 to 5% to almost 14%, increased over 5%, almost 28%, about the same, 29%, decreased 5.5%, and a decrease over 5%, about 24%. So the bulk of the people positive. 2020 was better than they expected, or the same. If I look at the forecast for closing for 2021, what do I expect? Up 10%, 23%. Up 10 to 25%, about 25%. Up 25% or more, 28.77%. So 76, almost 77% of the respondents said that they were going to have a much better 2021 than they had in the past. Only 13.7% said it was going to be the same, and only 9.5%, 9.6% roughly, said it was going to be worse than 2020. About the local market, how do they feel about their local market? Very positive, 44%, almost 45%. Somewhat positive, 42%. So 86% of the respondents felt their local market was going to be very strong. Unsure was about 14%, and nobody was negative. We didn't get one response back that said 2021 was going to be worse than 2020. How was your building cycle impacted by 2020? Almost 88% said their cycle time got extended. Nobody said it was shorter, and about 12%, 12.33% said it was about the same. Well, when I start asking the questions about how long, I get a little concerned. I only had less than 7% at under 60 to 90 days. And about 14% said 90 to 120. 90 to 120 is a good build time. I'd prefer it be under 90, but 90 to 120 is good build time. Well, I had almost 80% of the builders say their build time was over 120 days. 120 to 150, 32%, 150 plus, 47%. That's way too much time. And part of it's due to lack of trades and lack of supply and waiting for material and so forth. So we've had a big extension in time, which means I've got production going on, but I can't get the houses closed. And that was a big concern for Emma and me at the end of 2020, because we had all the overhead, all the carrying costs, everything for all these houses that we're getting built, but I can't get them closed by the end of the year. So we were forecasting kind of a reduction in net profit for the builders from 2019 to 2020. We'll see if that comes about. But everybody was busy. Guys were telling me they had good gross margins, but they couldn't get the things closed, and that was a problem. So what was the impact? What impacted the cycle time? 34% said that it was the pandemic, but 71% said it was material supply shortage or delays, and almost 44% said it was contractor availability. And then the other, I guess they couldn't figure it out. So anyway, how much cost variance during construction occurred? And you see almost no variance, 4%, have no idea, 8%, 0 to 2%, 37%, 2 to 5%, 36%, 5 to 10, almost 10%, over 10 to 25, 4% in variances. And those variances are lost profitability. That's basically what we're looking at, increased costs during the construction process. And it's basically these variances represent lost profitability in the operation. The average gross profit, these two don't fit very well. The average gross profit per home, and we said sales price minus lot plus direct construction costs, 15 to 20%, almost 60% of the builders were in that range, and that doesn't surprise me. But the problem is, if it costs me 18% to run my business, which is typically the case, it has been forever. If I'm making 15%, that means I'm losing 3%. If I'm making 20%, that means I'm making 2%. So very low profitability if you're there. We typically want a 30% gross profit coming through the operation. That's normally not the case that we see with the builders. But from 20 to 25, we had almost 24% of the builders in 20 to 25. That's the range that we typically see the builders in when we first start working with builders. 25 to 30, 11%. Over 30, I had 5.5%. But this is a disconnect, because my first line of defense for profitability is my gross profit. Well, what is the projected net profit for 2020? And 25% had no idea. Well, that doesn't surprise me. Nobody admitted that they were in the 0 to 3% profit. I had 11% say 3 to 5. which is probably where the builders were. 5 to 10, 41%, and over 10%, 22%. So I would say that the 5% that were over 30 probably will have, and part of the 25 to 30 would drop into that 10% that 10% plus at the 22. So there's a disconnect between these two numbers, but I don't know. I'd have to do some research to find out why. Now we look at the election. What did the election do? Well, we're going to have significant changes in the election in fiscal policy. We're going to have higher taxes on the wealthy and corporations. That's a foregone conclusion. We're going to have expanded earned income tax credit. We're going to have expanded child tax credit. We're going to reestablish the first-time home buyer tax credit. That's what we had from 2009 to 2012. And there's going to be a move to do tuition-free colleges, which has been talked about. We're going to have major new spending, public health, infrastructure, and clean energy. At least that's what the administration has been talking about. If I look at the Penn-Wharton budget model, and I take a look at that, a 10-year projection for the Democrat plan, they're going to raise $3.4 trillion worth of new taxes, and they're going to spend $5.4 trillion in increased spending. That does not include the emergency action plan for COVID-19. That's going to add another $2 trillion. They're talking about 1.9. The Republicans are trying to reduce that, but it's probably going to be around $2 trillion that we're going to get approved. So huge spending and huge taxes. Okay. Just a little aside. Remember I said that we've had a lot of excess savings? Thank goodness the consumer hasn't been spending the money, because that will create inflation. We also look at what the federal government's doing. That will increase inflation, because we've got limited resources being chased by lots of money. So I don't know how long the Fed can sustain the low interest payments. Now, the Fed came out and said that they're going to keep the 0 to 0.25 target through 2023. That's great. If they do that, if that's the case, that will keep us in the 2.5 to 2.75 mortgage rate range in the relationship, which is going to be very positive for housing. Okay? Now, I go and look at what the last 2 weeks have done. The president has signed 42, as of last Friday, 42 executive orders, directives, or proclamations. Several of them have been on immigration, and we've got 2 caravans that are marching their way up the 1,000 miles to the border of the United States. He's revoked the permit for the Keystone Pipeline. That directly unemployed 11,000 people, but that is a base industry, so you multiply that by 5, because that's the ripple effect of a base employment. So the 11,000 that we're talking about is just the tip of the iceberg of what the close down of the Keystone Pipeline was, and he's threatening to close down another pipeline very shortly. He stopped the construction of the border wall. Again, that's a base industry. So when you get rid of all the jobs in the base industry, you got to multiply that by 5 for the grocery store, the liquor store, the barber, the drugstore, and all the rest of the employees that are support people for the people that are working on that. He also has paused the new oil and gas leases on U.S. lands and waters. That's going to have a big impact on Colorado. It's going to have a big impact on the Dakotas, Wyoming, and what's happening with that. and he's rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, and opening up communications with China. So this has been unbelievable, the amount of executive orders and action that's occurred in the last 2 weeks. And I understand there were 3 more executive orders that they were going to sign yesterday. So it would have increased the executive orders to 50 to 45 as we go through. So here's my forecast. But my forecast, I don't have the impact of the change in the administration in the forecast. So I gotta look at that. And one of the concerns that I have is the demand for housing is going to be fantastic, but what's the physical impact of what's going on with the change in the administration? GDP 3.5% for 2021, and that's pretty much baked in the cake. It might be a little bigger than that, but about 3.5% for the year. Unemployment will drop to about 6%. We may have a little bit of a blip up because of some of the decisions that have been made by the new administration. 30-year fixed mortgage, about 2.9% for the average for the year. Housing starts, total starts, 1.5 million, 1.525 million. That's a 10% increase over last year. Single family, 1.110. I've got a 12% increase for single family, and I've got about a 5% for multifamily. Multifamily will be suburban multifamily, not necessarily urban core multifamily. There's a lot of old multifamily stuff in the suburban areas that need to be refurbished or replaced, and so I would suspect that we'll see some suburban multifamily being built, and that's basically where that's coming from. New home sales, 945,000. That's a 16.5% increase. Median sales price will jump up about 6% to 350,000. Existing home sales is going to increase about 7% to a little over 6 million for the year. That's going to be hurt because of inventory. It's still 1.9 months worth of inventory, and it's been going down. So I would suspect that it's going to be about 6 million, but it's going to be hindered by inventory. Median sales price is going to be 319.4, and that's going to go up 8%. You see that is, I have a 6% increase in new home sales and about an 8% increase in existing homes. Again, because of the tightness of inventory, the price is going to go up probably more substantially on existing homes. The other thing is we're building smaller houses, so the mix is changing a little bit on new home sales, where you can't really change the mix too much on existing homes. So that's kind of where we stand. I got the charts, and I put the charts in just for us to look at where the industry is in relationship to where it's been. This goes back to 1959. The big peaks that you see in the 69 to 75 or to 79, that's when the baby boomers came into the market. We also had the Omnibus Housing Act, which we had 235 and 236 subsidy programs for new homes and rental property, and that also had a big impact on that demand. But basically, that was the impact of the baby boomers coming into the marketplace. And you see where we are. We're sitting right here. We barely are getting back to getting into normal production right now in the operation. And you can begin to see why our support facilities of the labor and manufacturing hasn't been quite there to expand on the performance that we've had. Now I'm gonna hone in when I've got 3 sets of charts. I got the chart from 59, then I go from 91. This shows the last cycle, and then I'm going to go month to month on the recovery. So again, this is a full cycle that we've had with the drop. This was the drop from that we had where the 80% drop in the market. And you see, it just was 2 years of just devastation for the industry, and the industry is still trying to recover from that. This is the starts since January of 09, and you see down at the beginning of this chart, that was the first time home buyer subsidy program and the impact on housing when that occurred. When it was over with, you see that we dropped off and then we started our recovery. But the other thing is, look at the back end. This is where we were pre-COVID in March, and we dropped off and then we picked back up very rapidly, and we've had a very super V recovery in the housing activity. This is the single family starts. And again, you see where we are. If I go back to 1959, you see where we are. We've got a long way to go yet to recover back into the normal, 1.2, 1.3 million starts. We should be at about 1.15 million starts. We've still got a long way to go to get there. This is the cycle from 91 through the end of 2020. And you see, again, we're still on the low side of where we should be in the way of production. And this was the single family first time home buyer market down here in the 09 to 012. And then this is the recovery that the single family starts had from the COVID. And you see, we just went off the charts. I had to change the relationship in the charts so that we could actually show the whole graph. But this is what's happening for us as we enter 2021. This is multifamily. I go back again to 59 and take a look, and this is the baby boomers entering the marketplace, and this is the historical look. Most economists only look about 10 years back. So the only thing that most of the economists are looking at is this. And we didn't have a multifamily bubble. We see multifamily here, and this is 2009 through 19. This is where we started seeing the millennials coming into the rental market and the increase in the rental market. So I go back and I take a look. This is the typical chart that most economists look at, and that's why they're saying multifamily is overbuilt. But when I talk to my multifamily builders, they are over 95% occupied. They're raising rents. They aren't seeing any kind of a exit. It might be in the urban core, but my guys that are building multifamily in the suburban areas are not seeing any kind of softening in the multifamily market. They are saying that it's harder to get loans for multifamily now, mainly because everybody believes this chart, not necessarily looking at the long-term chart. This is what's been happening a month to month for the multifamily starts. And again, we had a drop off because of COVID. They bounced back and they dropped back off again. I would suspect that 2020, it'll pick back up again a little bit. Okay, this is sales. Okay, and I go back to 63. They didn't collect the information on sales prior to 63, so 63 is kind of the start of the information. But again, you see that we're still need sales in the operation. The new home sales, again, the front of this in January 09, that's the first time home buyer program. You see us coming through the COVID at the back of this chart, and we jump back up very strongly. We've come back down. I would suspect some of this is seasonality. Once we get into our selling season, it'll bounce back up. Interest rates have been bouncing a little bit, but basically they've been under 3 for the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Like I said, it was 2.68 at the end of the year. That's really good. There has been they tightened up the credit standards, but I understand that they're softening the credit standards right now, which is going to also give us some bump in new home sales. This is our inventory. We ended up having almost no inventory. We've been building the inventory up in the COVID. We basically sold off most of our inventory, and you see it drop down. We picked it back up in the last couple of months. As we go down, this is the supply, and you see we dropped down to under basically 3.5. Normally, I need about 6 months of supply for existing and new, and we're way below that in the way of supply. This is existing home sales. You see that first-time home buyer had a big impact back in 2009 to 2010, but then you see it's coming out of the COVID shutdown, and you see how fast that's come up. But the problem is they got a limit because they don't have any inventory. I mean, they have none, basically, and people are offering more than the asking price for houses. I had a house, one of my neighbors just recently sold their house. It was on the market a day and a half and was gone. So, I mean, it's just instantaneous listing to sale at this point for existing homes. This is the inventory that they have. It's dropped off the chart basically in December, and they're at 1.9 months of supply at this point. So I have to have, as soon as I see a for sale sign or I hear about a for sale sign, and a lot of my neighborhood, I've never seen a for sale sign. It is sold before the people have a for sale sign in their front yard. It's gone. So I just see the moving trucks come in. That's about all we see. So the industry is poised for a very, very strong year. Now, this is manufactured housing. I put this in because everybody says, oh, we're going to go to manufactured housing or modular homes. That's the answer. We're going to get away from field-built homes. Well, look at where they are. And one of the problems is we're in a cyclical industry, and manufactured housing can't survive in a cyclical industry because they have all the fixed costs. We've been very smart, and we have very low fixed costs in our operation, so we can weather the economic cycles. Back in the 70s, this was when Operation Breakthrough, when George Romney was Secretary of HUD, that the father George Romney, not the current George Romney that everybody knows. But he was going to industrialize the industry, and they built a ton of factories all over the world. Now Clayton Homes owns basically all those factories because they all went broke. But that was the big bubble here when we were going to try to change the industry to be more of a manufacturer home process and the operation. Didn't work, and you see where they are today. It's minuscule compared to where it used to be. And Clayton basically is a financial institution because they hold the mortgages on all the mobile homes and the modular homes. So that's pretty much it. But I wanted to put that in because it always comes up as a question. Well, we're going to get away from stick built. We're going to get away from field built. We're going to do modular homes. It's not going to happen. Okay. So if you want to read my report, it's a 35-page report. You can go to my website and download a copy of the report, and it tells you almost year by year through this decade of what you should be building and what generation you should be following. It shows when the generations are going to be looking for large homes, when they're going to be looking for starter homes, when the baby boomers are going to, when is the big blush of baby boomers going to be looking for the downturn. One of the things about this baby boomer generation, I don't, well, there's two things with the baby boomers. They are not going to migrate to the big retirement communities. One is they don't think they're old. They think they're 10 years or more younger than they physically are. They don't want to be around old people. They'd like to have their grandkids be welcome into their neighborhood. They'd like to have young people around them. So I don't see them necessarily migrating to a Del Webb type of a community. I do see them in planned unit communities where there's a section of that community that has product designed for the empty nester, baby boomer, retiree, but not gigantic enclaves. They also, the bulk of them will stay put. In other words, everybody says, well, they're all going to move to Florida, they're all going to move to Phoenix. Not really. That's a small percentage of the whole population. Most of the population will stay where they are because they've got their grocery store, they've got their drugstore, they've got their bank, they've got their family, they've got their grandkids. So they will downsize, but they will downsize locally in place and not migrate. If they do migrate, they might have a second home in a warmer climate, or they will have a rental in a warmer climate, but not necessarily are they all going to move to Florida and all move to Phoenix in the operation. So that's going to be an interesting proposition, but they're all retired. Basically, right now they're all retired, and so that's going to be, and they postponed it mainly because last year, last decade, the houses were the oasis. Their home, the big home, was the oasis for their kids not being able to be employed. And so they were scared to death about leaving the big house. Now they're leaving, and they're leaving in droves. So they're on the move. So anyway, get a copy, and I think it'll guide you through the decade in kind of decisions you need to make on the demand. Okay, Emma Jane, I'm handing it back to you.
All right, we have some questions.
I figured.
I'm going to start with the ones that were, I feel like you answered most of these, but I did want to make sure that I address them. So if you want to just kind of make a point or two. So we have several questions. The first one, this is from before the webinar started, was even if the 2020s will be strong for housing demand, do you predict it will ebb and flow on a year-by-year basis?
The product that's going to be demanded will change. The demand is going to be there. But I look at the age of the main group of the millennials and when they hit, because typically, generally, somewhere around 50 to 52 is where the family spends the most money on housing. That's when they buy their second home. That's when they buy their big mansion or their ultimate home, is somewhere in that 52, 53 range. And historically, they buy their first home about 32, but the millennials have been late. Millennials have been basically pushed to about 39. So millennials are coming in later than historical, but I would suspect they're coming in later. They might bypass the first-time home and go to a first-time move-up as opposed to the first-time home. They haven't had the ability to get condos and townhouses. Condos have been a bad have had a bad rap, and so the condos haven't been there. That's normally when they first go into ownership, and then they go into a single family around 31, 32 years old. That's changed. They stayed in the rental a lot longer than they normally would. So what I look at is the aging of the population and when are they going to hit these points where I'm going to have a difference in product that I need to produce to meet the demand that we're going to see from the consumer. So it will change. The product will change during the year, but the demand is going to be pretty strong. I mean, we've got very strong demand going through the market. Will the federal government screw it up? Yeah, I would look at probably about well before all these executive orders, I was looking at about 2 years out where we'd probably have a little dip in the market, not because the demand is soft, but because interest rates increased and we've got some inflation going on and so forth. That might come a little earlier because of all the stuff that's going on with the federal government. I don't know at this point. It's only 2 weeks. They've only had 2 weeks to screw up the economy. So I got to give them a little, maybe give them about 6 months before I can really say, okay, this is the kind of thing what's going to happen because of the administration. But the demand's dynamite.
I feel like you kind of answered the second question in your question, but I'll go ahead and ask it. Which type of housing will be most in demand? Under 300,000, 300 to 500,000, 500 to 800,000, over 800,000, and single family versus condo versus apartments?
Apartments have had their run. It's now single family. It will be smaller product. For the millennial, it will. First off, the millennials don't want to own anything. They're an interesting proposition. The baby boomers wanted to own everything. So there's a little bit of difference in psychology there. But the millennial be smaller product, but they have family. Probably not decked out. You're going to see the baby boomers, they're leaving big homes. They're going to get smaller square footage, but they're going to want it decked out. So it could be very expensive, smaller footprint type of product. And what they're looking at. I'm concerned about the large. First off, somebody asked about over $1 million houses. With the interest rates the way they are, the demand for the large houses is going to survive for a while. But as the baby boomers vacate their big homes, there's going to be a glut of big homes on the market that the millennials don't want. And there's not enough Gen Xers to buy them. So I would suspect there's going to be the smaller product is going to be strong. The pricing is going to be strong. The big houses are going to get soft towards the end of the decade because there's going to be so many of them that have been vacated by the baby boomers. So I would, when I look at it again, the report kind of spells all this stuff out, but I would look at if I'm in the big houses, I'd pay a lot of attention to the inventory of existing homes and what's happening on the pricing for the existing homes, because I think that's going to get towards the middle of the decade and later, I think that's going to get really soft.
So you just answered Peter's question about are the market projections available for custom home building in the 1 million to 2 million price range?
Yeah,
so
I saw that question
that
came in. I saw that question come in before the seminar, and with the interest rates as low as they are, yes, I think it's going to be strong. It's going to be strong with the Gen Xers, the latter part of the Gen Xers, and maybe the first part of the millennials, who kind of still look at big product. But I think it's going to get soft. I will tell you that on the big houses, the South is going to do better than the North. The migration, and again, one of the reasons for the migration to the South, that's where the jobs are going. Jobs are going south. I will have a pretty good demand for big houses in the South. And if the demand goes south, business goes south, employment goes south, you're going to have big demand for larger houses in the South. And then you're going to have the grandparents following the grandkids. And so I would suspect that you will have a fairly good movement of Gen Xers heading to the South. Not necessarily for the sun, but because their grandkids are there.
Okay, we have 6 questions, so you're going to have to summarize a little bit better, Chuck. One more question. This question is about the trades. Which trades will benefit the most or least from the housing demand? And is there more of a shortage of some versus others?
Which trades will benefit?
Yep. Do they benefit more or less based on the housing demand? And is there a shortage of some versus other trades?
Well, I got a shortage of plumbers. I've got a shortage of carpenters. You know, I need to get carpentry skills in place. I've got a shortage of plumbers. I've got a shortage of electricians. I would say that the HVAC, electrical, plumbing, framing, probably the big ones, and they need to be trained. I would like to see the junior colleges and the high schools and the home builders associations join forces to start training in VOTEC for those crafts.
All right. Lots of multifamily built in the 2010s. Did this have an effect on single family starts? And did this make up for the supply manufacturers' decline in single family?
Multifamily increased during the latter part of the 2010s. That's where everybody said that the millennials stayed home. No, they not necessarily did they. They postponed marriage. They doubled up. They moved into inner city. They moved into multifamily. They're now moving out of multifamily. COVID's forcing that a little bit. So it's going to single family. And what was the second half of that?
Did this have an effect on single family starts, and did this make up for the supply manufacturers' decline in single family?
No.
Okay.
No, wasn't big enough. There was no bubble in multifamily. There hasn't been no bubble in multifamily.
All right, this is from Denny. Did you see 2020, or do you see 2022 and 2023 as a repeat of 2021, especially related to sales velocity?
Yes. Sales velocity is going to be strong.
That was an easy one. Thanks, Denny. Peter is asking, he says, I see a large price disparity between new home sales pricing and existing home sales pricing. Will this affect housing starts and type of product to build? No,
there is no product on the market. Existing home is going to escalate in price faster than new home sales and sales price.
All right. This is from Robert. With too low retirement savings for many baby boomers, don't you think modular home communities like the ones you see on the rise in Florida will be the most viable living option for many in other parts of the country?
I don't see any big movement that way. I mean, you're still going to see it. They're still going to have a good, they're still going to have their share of the market, but I don't see a massive expansion. of them in the marketplace. First off, they've got massive problems with zoning and putting their parks in place. So I don't see them being the answer to affordability. I think we can do extremely well with if we would start building smaller houses, 1,000, 1,200, 1,400 square foot houses. We can do a fantastic job of that with lots of a lot of architectural style and community. I've seen it. I've seen that kind of product being done in Texas and Florida and so forth. I think we can do a fantastic job. And you know, the modular industry has a couple of problems in the fact that what does it look like? And I got a 300-mile radius from the plant that's in my effective radius to build it. So there's some limitations there in looking at what they can do.
Okay, well, we are down to the last question. This is from Kimball. The square foot annual starts show 1,150 is about the average, but the annualized, oh, sorry, single family, thanks, Kimball. Oh my gosh, this is what happens when you ask things live. The single family annual starts show 1,150 is about average, but the annualized single family starts is already at 1,350. Are we already overheated?
No. No. We're not overheated.
All right.
We could build 1.5 to 1.6 million units a year forever. That's kind of equilibrium. When we get to 2 million, we've overbuilt. So if we get to 1.8, 1.9 to 2 million, yes. But remember, we're starting out with about a 3 million shortage. 3 to 4 million short starting this decade. So if I look at the 50 years that I've been doing this, about 1.5, 1.6 is equilibrium. We're 1.3. We're still 200,000 short. So no.
All right. Well, that was the last question. Do you want to switch the slide for me so I can make a couple of quick announcements for everybody?
Sorry for running over, but hopefully everybody enjoyed it.
Well, we still have 68 people signed in, so we were up to 100 guests today. So if you'll switch the slide, I wanted to make a quick announcement on a couple of events that are coming up.
Oh, you need me to click
I need you to, yep. So if you'll go, just go ahead and let's just get to our, because we're so far over time. Make sure we have a couple of things going on with IBS this week. Next week we have Ed and Jim with Stephen Moore at the IBS virtual experience, and then Emma will also be on a women's in consulting or in construction event next week too. So make sure to tune into that. We have that on our Facebook page and Twitter and all that stuff. Brianne takes care of that for me. So look for those links to go ahead and join that stuff. We also have all of our services that are available to you guys to use, but I do want to make an announcement on some of the events coming up. So if you go to the next page, Chuck, these are all of our manufacturers. HBU, we have Managing for Profit. We are going to do a live event on February 23rd through the 25th here in Denver. So if you have not signed up yet, we do have to limit the class to 30, I think, is the maximum number of people we can have in there. So make sure you get registered. Lisa will take care of that for you. We also have a lumber workshop. It's limited to 5 companies. It's an exclusive lumber workshop featuring plan reviews and audits designed to help attendees reduce construction costs and increase profitability. Ed Hauk is going to be running that along with Dave Burley from Bemare. So you want to make sure to get into that workshop. If you're interested, you can email me or Lisa, and we can get you more details on that. Chuck has also told me today that he's going to do a variance control class on February 16th. So look in your emails for information on registering for that. That will also be limited. It is limited to 20 people. It will be a Zoom virtual class as well. So the lumber workshop's limited to 5 companies. The variance control workshop is limited to 20. And that will be a 4-hour session on February 16th. And again, thank you to our sponsor. Thank you to all of you. It's great seeing you guys all here. I love seeing all of your names come up every couple weeks for our webinar Wednesday. And in 2 weeks, we'll have another webinar Wednesday, and Jim will be talking about cycle time and controlling that. So make sure you check the website to register for all of those events. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, and we do want to thank ECI for sponsoring this. Thank you.
Thank you.